Every morning, thousands of people unknowingly speak words that sabotage their own financial breakthrough. What if the struggle in your finances is not only happening around you, but also through you? What if invisible doors are being opened by habits so common that almost nobody questions them? Today, an X switch exposes a disturbing truth about the spiritual power of your morning words and declarations. What you are about to hear may challenge everything you thought was harmless. Stay with me because what is hidden is about to be revealed. The first thing I learned in the occult was that words are never empty. Most people believe a curse must come from a dark ritual, a hidden ceremony, or an evil person speaking against them. But that is not always how it works. Sometimes the most effective curse is the one a person repeats over themselves every single day. They never see it. They never question it. They never realize they have become the voice speaking limitation into their own future. As a former witch, one of the most shocking discoveries I made was how often people agreed with defeat before they ever faced it. They woke up tired, they looked at their bills, they remembered their problems, and before the day even began, they released words that established the atmosphere around them. I am always broke. Nothing ever works for me. I can never get ahead. I will probably struggle forever. To many people, these sound like harmless expressions, simple frustration, normal conversation. But spiritually, something deeper is happening. Every declaration carries agreement. Every agreement creates direction. And direction eventually produces results. The enemy understands something many believers forget. Words shape expectations. Expectations influence decisions. Decisions affect outcomes. This is why negative declarations become so dangerous, not because the sentence itself contains magical power, but because repeated hopelessness can reshape the way a person thinks, acts, and responds to opportunities. Imagine someone who says every morning that they will never succeed. When a new opportunity appears, what happens? They hesitate, they doubt, they assume failure before trying. Fear begins making decisions for them. Soon they are living inside the reality they expected. Not because fate trapped them, because belief influenced behavior. This is one of the oldest traps in spiritual warfare. The battlefield is often the mind before it ever becomes the bank account. I remember hearing stories from people who constantly spoke poverty over themselves. They laughed while saying it. They joked about it. They repeated it so often that it became part of their identity. Eventually, they stopped seeing themselves as people capable of growth. They stopped believing increase was possible. They stopped preparing for opportunities. They stopped expecting favor. They stopped taking action. The financial struggle became bigger because hopelessness became normal. That is exactly what darkness wants. Not merely empty pockets, empty expectation. Because a person who has lost expectation often stops moving forward. The enemy loves stagnation. He loves cycles. He loves routines that keep people trapped in the same place year after year. And one of the easiest ways to maintain those cycles is through constant agreement with defeat. Think about how many people wake up and immediately declare disaster. Before breakfast, before prayer, before gratitude, before a single positive action. The first words released into the day are words of failure. Then they wonder why their mindset remains heavy, why motivation disappears, why confidence feels distant, why opportunities seem impossible. The problem often begins long before the financial struggle becomes visible. It begins in the hidden conversations taking place every morning. You may have experienced this yourself. Perhaps you looked at your bank account and immediately said, "There is never enough." Perhaps you looked at your job and said, "I will always be stuck here." Perhaps you looked at your future and said, "Nothing is going to change." At that moment, something important happened. You stopped speaking possibility. You started reinforcing limitation. And repetition gives limitation strength. The more a person repeats a belief, the more familiar it becomes. The more familiar it becomes, the more natural it feels. Eventually, the belief no longer feels like a belief. It feels like reality. That is the danger. Because once limitation feels like reality, people stop challenging it. They stop fighting it. They stop expecting anything different. This is where many financial battles are lost. Not in the marketplace, not in the economy, not in the workplace, but in the private words spoken before the day begins. The ex-witches I once knew understood something alarming. People often destroy their confidence without any outside assistance. Fear speaks, doubt agrees, hopelessness settles in, and the cycle continues. Yet there is another side to this story. The moment you recognize the pattern, you gain the power to confront it. Awareness changes everything. You cannot break a chain you refuse to acknowledge. But once you identify it, you can challenge it. Instead of declaring defeat, you begin declaring possibility. Instead of repeating limitation, you begin speaking hope. Instead of expecting failure, you begin preparing for growth. This does not mean pretending problems do not exist. Real faith is not denial. Real faith is refusing to let problems become the final authority over your thinking. You may have bills, but the bills do not define your future. You may face setbacks, but setbacks do not determine your destiny. You may be struggling today, but today's struggle does not have to become tomorrow's identity. That shift is powerful, because the moment you stop partnering with hopelessness, you create room for new decisions. New decisions create new actions. New actions create new possibilities, and possibilities create movement. Many people pray for financial breakthrough while continuing to rehearse financial defeat. They ask for increase, then spend the rest of the day declaring decrease. They ask for opportunity, then spend the rest of the day expecting disappointment. The conflict becomes internal. Part of them wants freedom. Another part keeps reinforcing captivity. The first battle is not always external. The first battle is agreement. What are you agreeing with every morning? What story are you repeating? What expectation are you feeding? What future are you rehearsing? Those questions matter. Because your daily words reveal your daily expectations, and your daily expectations influence your daily decisions. Today, the challenge is simple. Listen carefully to yourself. Pay attention to the phrases that leave your mouth. Notice the declarations you repeat without thinking. Identify the words that continually point you toward defeat. Then confront them. Do not allow hopelessness to become your morning ritual. Do not allow fear to become your daily companion. Do not allow limitation to become your identity. The cycle can be interrupted. The pattern can be challenged. The agreement can be broken. And the moment that happens, a new direction becomes possible. This revelation is only the beginning, because there is another hidden habit many people practice every morning that quietly strengthens financial struggle without them realizing it. And what it does behind the scenes is even more dangerous. There is a habit so common that millions perform it before they even leave their homes. They do it while getting dressed. They do it while driving to work. They do it while scrolling through their phones. They do it while talking to family and friends. Most never recognize its influence. Most never question its effect. Yet it quietly shapes the atmosphere of their entire day. That habit is constant, complaining. As a former witch, one thing that shocked me was seeing how often people fuel their own discouragement without realizing it. They were not participating in rituals. They were not speaking incantations. They were simply feeding negativity every single morning, and negativity has consequences. The moment many people wake up, they begin listing everything wrong with their lives. The job is terrible. The economy is terrible. Their boss is terrible. Their opportunities are terrible. Their future is terrible. Every conversation becomes a catalog of problems. Every sentence becomes another brick in a wall of discouragement. Now understand this clearly. Recognizing problems is not the issue. Real problems exist. Bills exist. Unexpected setbacks exist. Financial pressure exists. Ignoring reality is not wisdom. But constantly magnifying problems while ignoring possibilities creates a dangerous imbalance. Whatever receives your attention gains influence. Whatever gains influence begins shaping your perception, and perception affects behavior. This is where many people become trapped. Their minds become trained to notice obstacles faster than opportunities. They become experts at finding reasons something will fail. They become specialists in predicting disappointment. They become convinced that struggle is inevitable. Over time, this mindset affects every area of life. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. Both lose a business opportunity. Both experience financial pressure. Both encounter disappointment. The first person immediately concludes, "Nothing good ever happens to me." The second person says, "This setback is painful, but I will keep moving forward." The circumstances may be similar. The response is completely different. One response reinforces defeat. The other preserves hope. And hope matters more than many people realize. Hope keeps people searching. Hope keeps people learning. Hope keeps people trying again. Hope keeps people open to new possibilities. Without hope, people often stop taking action altogether. That is why constant complaining becomes so dangerous. It gradually weakens expectation. It slowly drains motivation. It convinces people that effort is pointless. The tragedy is that many never notice the process happening. They assume they are simply being realistic. They assume they are telling the truth. They assume they are describing reality. But over time, they stop describing reality and start defining it through a negative lens. Everything becomes evidence that success is impossible. Everything becomes proof that breakthrough will never come. Everything becomes another reason to give up. This is exactly how cycles become stronger. Not because circumstances never change, but because perception refuses to change. I remember hearing countless stories from individuals who believed financial increase was impossible for them. Years later, opportunities appeared, connections appeared, ideas appeared, resources appeared, yet they dismissed them. Why? Because their minds had already accepted defeat. The opportunity arrived, the expectation did not. And without expectation, many opportunities are ignored. Think about that carefully. Sometimes the obstacle standing in front of a breakthrough is not lack of opportunity, it is lack of belief that opportunity exists. A person who expects failure often overlooks doors that are already opening. A person who expects disappointment may never walk through the opportunity standing directly in front of them. That is why complaining becomes more than a habit. It becomes a filter. Everything passes through it. Good news becomes temporary. Bad news becomes permanent. Possibilities become unlikely. Problems become certain. The filter grows stronger every day. And the stronger it becomes, the harder it becomes to see alternatives. This is why gratitude is so powerful. Not because gratitude magically eliminates challenges, but because gratitude changes focus. Gratitude reminds you that not everything is broken. Gratitude reminds you that not every door is closed. Gratitude reminds you that progress is still possible. When a person begins every morning with gratitude, something shifts. Their attention changes, their perspective changes, their emotional energy changes. Instead of scanning for reasons to quit, they begin noticing reasons to continue. Instead of expecting disappointment, they remain open to possibility. That shift can influence decisions in profound ways. Consider someone who constantly complains about work. Eventually, they stop performing at their best. They lose motivation. They become disengaged. Their attitude becomes visible. Opportunities for growth become less likely. Now consider someone facing the same challenges but maintaining determination. They continue learning. They continue improving. They continue preparing. When opportunity arrives, they are ready. The difference is not magic. The difference is mindset influencing action. This is one of the most overlooked realities in financial struggle. People often focus entirely on external circumstances while ignoring internal habits. Yet internal habits frequently determine how external circumstances are handled. Complaining creates exhaustion. Gratitude creates resilience. Complaining creates passivity. Gratitude encourages engagement. Complaining narrows vision. Gratitude expands awareness. Every morning you are strengthening one of these patterns. You are feeding one of these directions. You are reinforcing one of these mindsets. The question is which one? Listen carefully to your conversations. Listen carefully to your thoughts. Listen carefully to your reactions. Do they consistently move toward possibility? Or do they consistently move toward despair? Many people unknowingly spend years rehearsing disappointment. Then they wonder why motivation disappears. They wonder why confidence weakens. They wonder why action becomes difficult. The answer is often hidden in the daily habits they never examine. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about refusing to let negativity become your permanent lens. It is about refusing to let frustration become your identity. It is about refusing to allow discouragement to dictate your future. You can acknowledge challenges without surrendering to them. You can recognize obstacles without worshipping them. You can face reality without becoming imprisoned by it. That is where real change begins. The atmosphere around your finances is influenced by the mindset you cultivate every day. And when you stop feeding negativity, you create space for clarity, wisdom, discipline, and renewed action. But there is another morning behavior that many people overlook completely. It appears harmless. It feels normal. Yet it quietly keeps countless individuals trapped in financial cycles they desperately want to escape. And its influence reaches deeper than most people can imagine. Fear rarely arrives announcing itself. It slips in quietly. It hides behind reasonable concerns. It disguises itself as caution. It presents itself as wisdom. And before a person realizes what is happening, fear has taken control of their decisions. As a former witch, I witnessed something disturbing. Many people were not being held back by external forces. They were being held back by internal fear. They woke up every morning expecting loss, expecting failure, expecting rejection, expecting disappointment. And those expectations shape the direction of their lives. The enemy does not always need to stop you. Sometimes all he needs to do is convince you to stop yourself. That is why fear becomes such a powerful weapon. Fear convinces people not to apply. Fear convinces people not to try. Fear convinces people not to learn. Fear convinces people not to move. The opportunity may exist. The ability may exist. The resources may exist. But fear keeps people frozen. And the frozen person rarely reaches their potential. Think about how many people begin each day with anxious thoughts. Before they even leave bed, their minds are racing. What if I fail? What if things get worse? What if I lose everything? What if I never recover? Those questions feel harmless, but repeated fear-based thinking creates emotional exhaustion. And exhausted people often make smaller decisions, safer decisions, defensive decisions, not because they lack ability. Avoid pain. The problem is that growth often requires movement. Progress often requires risk. Opportunity often requires courage. Fear works against all three. Imagine a person who dreams of starting a business. Every morning they think about it. Every morning they feel inspired. But every morning fear arrives. What if nobody buys? What if I lose money? What if people laugh at me? What if I am not good enough? Eventually the dream remains a dream, not because success was impossible, because fear became stronger than action. This pattern repeats everywhere. People avoid applying for better jobs. People avoid learning new skills. People avoid building connections. People avoid taking healthy financial steps, not because they are incapable, because fear convinces them that failure is guaranteed. One of the greatest victories fear achieves is making people predict defeat before evidence exists. Fear loves assumptions. Fear loves worst case scenarios. Fear loves imagined disasters. It creates movies inside the mind. It shows failure before effort, loss before opportunity, rejection before introduction, defeat before the battle even begins. And when people believe those mental images, their behavior changes. Their confidence weakens. Their enthusiasm fades. Their initiative disappears. Soon they become spectators in their own lives, watching opportunities pass by, watching others move forward, watching doors close that they never attempted to open. That is a painful place to live, because deep inside they know they were capable of more. Yet fear convinced them to settle. Fear convinced them to wait. Fear convinced them to stay where they were. The tragedy is that fear often feels responsible. It feels safe. It feels protective. But excessive fear rarely protects potential. It usually restricts it. I remember hearing stories from people who delayed important decisions for years. Not months, years. The opportunity stood before them. The resources were available. The timing was favorable. Yet fear kept whispering, "Not now. Wait longer. You are not ready. There is too much risk." Eventually the opportunity disappeared, and regret replaced fear. That is one of the hidden costs people rarely discuss. Fear promises protection, but often delivers regret. The person who never tries may avoid temporary discomfort, but they often experience long-term frustration, because deep inside they know what might have been possible. Every morning, countless people begin their day feeding that cycle. They open their eyes. They immediately think about problems. They immediately imagine disasters. They immediately rehearse worst-case scenarios. Their minds become training grounds for anxiety. And anxiety becomes the lens through which they view every opportunity. This is why developing faith-based thinking is so important. Faith is not pretending challenges do not exist. Faith is refusing to allow fear to become the highest authority in your life. Faith recognizes obstacles, but it also recognizes possibilities. Faith sees difficulties, but it also sees solutions. Faith acknowledges risk, but it refuses to become paralyzed by it. That balance is powerful, because people who operate from faith tend to move differently. They continue learning when others quit. They continue trying when others surrender. They continue improving when others become discouraged. Their progress may be slow. Their journey may be difficult, but they keep moving. And movement matters. You do not have to know every answer before taking the next step. You do not have to eliminate every risk before pursuing growth. You do not have to guarantee success before making an effort. Waiting for certainty often becomes another form of fear. Many people spend years preparing for a future they never pursue. They collect information, they create plans, they imagine possibilities, yet they never act. Fear keeps them in preparation mode forever. But breakthrough rarely happens through endless preparation alone. At some point, movement becomes necessary. At some point, action becomes essential. At some point, courage must replace hesitation. This is where many financial stories change. Not when circumstances magically improve, not when every obstacle disappears, but when a person stops allowing fear to dictate every decision, when they choose action over paralysis, when they choose growth over stagnation, when they choose possibility over assumption. Battle is not always external. Often it is internal. It is the battle between fear and faith, between hesitation and movement, between doubt and determination. Every morning that battle begins again, and every morning you choose which voice receives your agreement. Will it be fear or will it be faith? That choice influences more than emotions. It influences decisions, and decisions influence outcomes. Yet there is one final morning habit that may be the most destructive of all. It quietly reinforces every negative pattern we have discussed. It keeps people trapped in cycles year after year. And until it is confronted, genuine financial transformation becomes much harder to achieve. There is a final pattern that most people never question. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It does not feel spiritual at all. In fact, it feels normal, routine, even necessary. But as a former witch, I can tell you something important. Some of the strongest spiritual traps are the ones that feel completely ordinary. This final habit is the act of beginning your morning without intentional alignment. No direction, no awareness, no grounding, no deliberate choice about what you are stepping into. People wake up and immediately react to life, not lead their day. They respond to it. They scroll, they rush, they panic, they complain. They consume information that they did not choose carefully. And in that state, they unconsciously agree with whatever dominates their attention first. This is what I call passive agreement. And passive agreement is powerful. Because whatever you do not challenge, you accept. Whatever you do not correct, you allow. Whatever you do not redirect, you absorb. Many people do not realize they are spiritually and mentally entering their day in a state of surrender. Not surrender to faith, but surrender to noise. And noise has direction. If the first thing you consume is fear, your mindset begins the day in fear. If the first thing you consume is negativity, your mindset begins the day in negativity. If the first thing you consume is comparison, your mindset begins the day in insecurity. And once the foundation is set, everything that follows builds on top of it. This is why many financial struggles feel repetitive. Not because people lack opportunity, but because they begin each day in the same mental condition that produced yesterday's decisions. A cycle is not just external, it is internal repetition. Same thoughts, same reactions, same expectations, same emotional responses, and therefore same outcomes. I remember observing individuals who desperately wanted financial change. They prayed for breakthrough, they hoped for open doors, they desired stability. But their mornings told a different story. The moment they woke up, they entered chaos. No clarity, no intention, no control over their mental direction. And by the time they started their day, their mindset had already been shaped by whatever influenced them first. That is why many people feel like they are always catching up. They are reacting instead of directing. They are responding instead of choosing. They are surviving instead of building. And survival mode rarely creates breakthrough. It only maintains existing patterns. This is where discipline becomes critical. Not religious discipline, not rigid performance, but intentional alignment. A moment where you decide, this is how my mind will operate today. This is what I will agree with. This is what I will agree with, will reject. Without that moment, external influences take control. And external influences are not always neutral. They often pull you toward distraction, toward fear, toward comparison, toward discouragement. And those states are not fertile ground for financial growth. Think about how financial decisions are actually made. They are not made in moments of calm clarity alone. They are often made under emotional influence, stress, fear, pressure, confusion. And when a person begins their day, already emotionally unstable, every decision becomes more vulnerable. They may overspend, they may procrastinate, they may avoid opportunities, they may delay action, not because they lack intelligence, but because their internal state is already misaligned. This is why mornings matter so much, not because of ritual, but because of direction. Direction determines trajectory, and trajectory determines destination. One small internal shift in the morning can influence dozens of decisions throughout the day. A calm mind makes clearer choices. A focused mind recognizes opportunities faster. A grounded mind resists emotional spending. A disciplined mind stays consistent under pressure. But a chaotic morning often leads to chaotic decisions. And chaotic decisions create chaotic financial patterns. Many people try to fix their finances without ever addressing their daily mental entry points. They focus on income, they focus on opportunities, they focus on external strategies, but they ignore the internal system that governs their reactions. And that system resets every morning. If it is not intentionally guided, it defaults to habit. And habit is often built from years of repetition. This is why change feels difficult for many people. Not because transformation is impossible, but because the default settings remain untouched. The mind returns to familiar patterns unless it is redirected. That is why awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you begin to notice how your mornings unfold, you gain power over them. When you begin to recognize patterns, you gain the ability to interrupt them. When you begin to choose your first thoughts instead of reacting to them, everything shifts. You start the day differently, you respond differently, you decide differently. And over time, those differences compound. Small changes become new habits become new results, and new results reshape identity. This is not instant transformation, it is consistent redirection, day after day, morning after morning, choice after choice, until the old cycle no longer has authority, until reaction is replaced by intention, until confusion is replaced by clarity, until financial stagnation is replaced by forward movement. But none of this begins externally. It begins with awareness of how you enter your day. Because what you silently agree with in the morning becomes the foundation for everything that follows. And once that agreement changes, your entire trajectory can begin to shift. What you have heard is not just information, it is exposure. The patterns that once worked silently against you lose power the moment you recognize them. No morning curse is stronger than a mind that has awakened to truth. No cycle is permanent when agreement is broken. You are not bound to repetition. You are not trapped in limitation. Step forward today with awareness and watch what begins to change around you.